Something strange happens the moment you start becoming a better person. You expect people to be glad. You are drinking less. You are lying less. You are calmer. You are kinder. You are finally not the person you were embarrassed to be last year. And the people closest to you get quiet. Not hostile at first, just cool, just a little distant, as if you had done something to them. And you cannot say it out loud, because saying it sounds insane. Imagine telling a friend, I stopped doing the things everyone told me to stop doing, and now people like me less. It sounds like arrogance. So you swallow it, and you start to wonder whether the change was a mistake, whether you have become insufferable without noticing. That private confusion is one of the most common and least discussed experiences in the spiritual life. In more than a decade of hearing confessions, this is the moment where I see people quietly give up. And it almost never looks like giving up. It looks like calming down. It looks like being reasonable again. Here is what I want you to understand before we go further. This reaction is not a sign that something went wrong. It is one of the oldest and most predictable events in Christian experience. And it is described with total precision in a single sentence spoken on a hillside 2,000 years ago. Christ says, Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Most people read that line and picture arenas and lions. Almost nobody reads it as a description of Tuesday afternoon at the office. Notice where that sentence sits. It comes last after 7 other statements about poverty of spirit, mourning, meekness, hunger for righteousness, mercy, purity of heart, peacemaking. It is not a separate category of holy people. It is the arithmetic result of the previous 7. Leave those, and this happens. That is the order. And the order is not decorative. The Greek elder Athanasius put it with unusual bluntness. He said that when a man begins to live seriously in the spirit of the Beatitudes, a war begins immediately, and it comes from 2 directions at once. One direction he expected, the other direction is people. Ordinary, decent, familiar people who suddenly cannot be in the room with him the way they used to be. So why does goodness irritate? Not because you are preaching. You are probably saying nothing at all. It is that your ordinary behavior has started functioning as a comparison, and nobody consented to being compared. You stop gossiping and the conversation has a hole in it. You stop drinking and the evening has a witness. Your restraint is experienced by other people as an accusation you never made. Saint John Chrysostom saw this in the 4th century and named it exactly. He said a virtuous man becomes a reproach simply by existing, because his life is a silent verdict on lives that have avoided the question. There is no cruelty required from you and no malice required from them. A candle does not insult the room. It just makes visible what the darkness was covering, and some people would rather the candle left. This is where the word righteousness has to be corrected, because we have flattened it. In modern speech, righteousness sounds like social justice, being on the right side, having correct opinions. That is not the meaning here. In the language Christ is using, righteousness means sanctification, becoming actually holy, being conforted to God in your interior life. The 8th Beatitude does not promise the kingdom to people persecuted for their politics. It promises it to people whose personal transformation has become inconvenient. inconvenient. And now, the part almost nobody prepares you for. The pressure that breaks people is almost never violence. It is mockery. It is the smile, the nickname, the tone at the dinner table, the group chat, you can feel yourself being discussed in. Father Athanasius said something about this that has stayed with me for years, that people will endure suffering and loss, but very few can endure being laughed at. Ask yourself which one you actually fear. If someone threatened your safety over your faith, you would probably discover courage you did not know you had. But if your colleagues found out you pray and one of them raised an eyebrow, would you explain, or would you make a joke about it first so that you get to hold the knife? That instinct to mock yourself before anyone else can is not humility. It is a small, well-dressed act of denial, and we perform it constantly. The fathers were not sentimental about this. In the Philokalia, the withdrawal of courage is treated as a passion in its own right, not a temperament, not a personality trait, something that can be healed and must be. St. Macarius describes the soul that keeps flinching backward until the flinch becomes its shape. St. Theophan, the recluse, taught that the will strengthens only under actual resistance, and that a faith which is never once uncomfortable in public has not yet been tested by anything. Comfort does not build a self. Friction does. There is a second thing that quietly ends people, and it has nothing to do with enemies. It is that they never counted the cost at the start. Christ tells the parable of the man who begins building a tower and runs out of money halfway, and everyone walks past the foundation and laughs. He does not fail because the tower was too tall. He fails because he began on enthusiasm. Most spiritual collapse is not dramatic betrayal. It is an unfinished foundation with weeds growing through it. So count it now, honestly, before you need to do. You need to. This will cost you a certain kind of ease with certain people. It will cost you the pleasure of being universally liked. It will cost you the version of yourself that could be dropped into any room and match its temperature exactly. That version of you was never a self. It was a mirror with a name. So if you are somewhere in your first year of this, or standing at the edge deciding whether to walk in, I recommend a short book for exactly that stage. It is called Your First Year in the Orthodox Church, and a good part of it deals with this specific problem, the social cost, the family reaction, that question you cannot ask out loud yet without feeling foolish. The link is in the pinned comment. It is not long and it is not academic. It is the conversation I would have with you if you sat down across from me. Now hear the refrain, because the whole thing turns here. The coldness you are feeling is not evidence that you have gone wrong. It is the evidence that something in you has become real enough to register. A person who changes nothing provokes nothing. A person who changes nothing provokes nothing. Saint Silvan, the Athonite, who understood the human heart better than most psychologists, insisted that the answer is never to harden yourself against those people, but to love them and to grieve for them, because the reaction is almost always coming out of their own pain and not out of yours. And this is the third layer, the one worth carrying out of this video. When you stop needing their approval to remain yourself, you have discovered that you have a self. You discover that you have a self. Not a personality, not a reputation, not a set of opinions borrowed from the room, and an actual self, standing somewhere the crowd cannot vote on. That is what the fathers meant by inner stability. It is the difference between a person who is calm because nothing is happening and the person who is calm because something is happening and they are still there. So do not aim at being disliked. Do not aim at being disliked. That is its own vanity, and the fathers warned about it too. Aim at being consistent at home and at work and in the group chat and when nobody's watching. St. Chrysostom said the crown is not given for suffering, but for the reason you suffered. For the reason you suffered. So make sure the reason is God and not your own stubbornness. And then let the reaction come, because you will no longer be renting your identity from the people around you. Here is the sentence to take with you. The moment your life stops needing an audience is the moment it starts belonging to you. Everything before that was performance with better manners. If this landed on something you have been feeling and could not name, tell me in the comments what it cost you. Because someone else reading it needs to know they are not the only one. And if you know a person who changed and got punished for it, send this to them today. God bless you.